I'm Aaron Gilchrist in for Hallie Jackson tonight with a breaking news special report. Donald Trump on trial. With court just wrapping up after one of the other biggest names in this case, former adult film star Stormy Daniels took the stand just 10 feet away from the former president, offering some new details about an alleged sexual encounter that prosecutors say lit the match that has a former president facing criminal charges for the first time in American history. Daniels saying it all went down in a Tahoe hotel room back in 2006. This now infamous picture allegedly taken hours before that happened. And after that, she said that after chatting briefly with the future president, she emerged from the bathroom to find him on the bed in a T-shirt and boxers. She said the room, quote, spun in slow motion, questioning how she, quote, misread the situation and feeling like she had put herself, quote, in a bad situation. Telling the jury she felt there was, in her words, an imbalance of power, that Mr. Trump was, quote, bigger and blocking the way out, but that she still didn't feel threatened by any of that. After that, she says they had sex. Now, that testimony causing an uproar for the defense, who even tried to get the judge to declare a mistrial because of what Daniels said. The judge didn't go for that, though. So why is Daniels at the center of this case anyway? Well, because she was paid $130,000 to keep quiet about that encounter. And remember, nobody is saying that the alleged affair or the hush money payment were on their own illegal. Prosecutors charging the former president with 34 counts of falsifying business records, alleging it was Mr. Trump's cover-up of the payments that was illegal and part of a scheme to influence the 2016 election. A reminder here, Mr. Trump pleaded not guilty to those counts and denies the alleged affair entirely. For the next 20 minutes, we will explain why everything you just heard matters, taking you inside all the rooms cameras couldn't be in. Our team of reporters and legal and political experts ready to break down everything you need to know. Let's start with Vaughn Hilliard outside the courthouse for us today. And Vaughn, before we get into everything that happened today, I do want to get first some breaking news out of another of Mr. Trump's legal cases I'm just being told about in my ear here. This is the federal classified documents case getting delayed indefinitely. Is it? Talk to us about that. It was scheduled for May 20th, right?
Right. We're just getting our own eyes on this order here, but Judge Cannon making it clear that the trial over classified documents is delayed indefinitely in Florida. This federal indictment leads to the question of whether this trial would begin before the November election. And I think they would be safe to say that this order here from Judge Cannon in Florida answers that question. And so we could very well be looking at a reality that the only criminal trial, only one of four that Donald Trump is facing here that will take place before the November election will be this one here that is now in its fourth week in New York over the alleged hush money payment scheme that Donald Trump is currently coming into Lower Manhattan every day for that is ongoing, Aaron.
All right, Vaughn, I'm going to ask you to stand by here for just a second. Turn to Danny Savalos, our NBC News legal analyst. Danny, I just want to get your take on what we just learned about happening in Florida, the delay, the indefinite delay of proceedings there.
It's a very interesting development. I mean, normally in federal court, that's the place where cases fly. They move very quickly. But of course, the Trump cases in federal court are obviously different because they involve so many complicated legal issues that delay was almost a certainty. So it is very interesting that the court is going to delay this indefinitely. At some point, they need to schedule a trial. Normally in federal court, they'll schedule a trial date and then change it later. But indefinitely is an interesting development.
All right, Danny, I'll get you to stand by for us here a second. Go back to Vaughn in New York, because, Vaughn, we do need to talk a little bit more about what happened inside that courtroom today. Take us through your read on what happened, some of the bombshell moments in the testimony today.
This was a day that was a long time coming. The American public became familiar with Stormy Daniels in 2018 when her story was made public more than a year after Donald Trump was elected to the White House. But of course, at that time in 2018, the American public was becoming familiar with what this alleged $130,000 scheme entailed. It was paying Stormy Daniels in October of 2016 to keep silent and not have her story become public because of concerns that it could damage Donald Trump's presidential election. And today, Stormy Daniels came within feet of Donald Trump, testifying for hours, answering the questions of prosecutors, but also Donald Trump's attorneys under cross-examination. If you just look at some of the exchanges between Stormy Daniels and the prosecution, you'll see why this was so pertinent here for the prosecution in their case, because of the salacious details that she brought forward, including describing that in 2006, when she was at a celebrity golf tournament in Lake Tahoe, she walked out of the bathroom of Donald Trump's hotel room, and that's when she saw him in a T-shirt and boxers, and ultimately had sex with him there. And that he, according to Daniels, testified that, oh, it was great. Let's get together again, honey bunch. The prosecution asked Stormy Daniels, did he ever express any concern at that point about his wife finding out? Stormy Daniels testifying here today, no.
You know, Vaughn, this day started with a quick post and then a delete from the former president, right? He referred to Daniels and said it was unfair that she was testifying today. It's possible that it was deleted because it potentially violated the judge's gag order that we've been talking about for so many weeks now, about talking about witnesses. For Mr. Trump, though, to give in on this point, to listen to his lawyer's advice here, to delete a post on his social media platform, that is not an insignificant thing.
No, it was, number one, Donald Trump doesn't often delete social media posts. And number two, just yesterday, Judge Merchan directly warned him that he may have no choice, despite him being a former president and potentially the next president, from putting him in jail. He has now violated his gag order 10 times, and Judge Merchan making it clear that another violation could lead him to send him to jail in order to not intimidate witnesses. And so that post was up for a few minutes before being taken down, and Stormy Daniels is a crucial witness here because of what the allegations are that she was bringing forward and the potential that her story could have had ramifications on the 2016 election, and therefore for the prosecution making the case to the jury that Donald Trump and Michael Cohen had every reason to try to silence her story for the purposes of making sure that her story and the telling of these graphic allegations of her sexual encounter with Donald Trump never got to the public before the election.
All right, Vaughn Hilliard for us live in New York City tonight. Vaughn, thank you for that. I want to turn to our legal experts now. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savallo still with us here, and Georgetown law professor Michelle Goodwin is here on set with us as well. Danny, I'll start with you here. You said yesterday that you thought the prosecution didn't even need to put Daniels on the stand. Talk to me about that. Do you think that they should have followed that bit of advice from you?
We shall see when cross-examination is over. Putting Stormy Daniels on the stand was a risk. Look at Exhibit A. My Exhibit A would be the motion for a mistrial. And by the way, that motion was probably going to be denied. The defense probably knew it would be denied, and it was based on Stormy Daniels' salacious testimony. But it's now in the record, and if this case goes up on appeal and 2 years from now it's overturned because of Stormy Daniels' testimony, then we can come back and say it was not worth the risk. Look, I think the people could have gotten most of this evidence without Stormy Daniels. They already had her lawyer testify. They already had plenty of testimony on the chaos after the or the need to buy the Stormy Daniels story from other sources, other witnesses. So I guess the way to answer that question is that if this case ends up on appeal after a conviction and is overturned because of Stormy Daniels' testimony overreaching, well, then Stormy Daniels was a risk that was not worth it.
Well, Michelle, let me turn to you here. Stormy Daniels overreaching. It's a question, right? I mean, the judge in this case had a lot to say about Stormy Daniels' testimony as she was giving it today. He said that she was offering too many details, as Danny noted. She was speaking too fast. There were objections that we saw that led to these starts and stops in the courtroom today. What impact do you think some of this back and forth and these issues would have on the larger presentation of the case and the jury's interpretation of the facts?
So that's a very good question. Here's an opportunity for a woman to tell her story, a person who says that she was threatened in 2011. Today, she told a story that seems to lift up many of the allegations from nearly a dozen women that the former president had sexually assaulted them or acted inappropriately. Some of that got into the record today. So one does take note that the defense team immediately moved for a mistrial. That's likely not going to happen. There are some risks as the case goes up and might be appealed. But there is something to be said about the nation hearing from this woman who alleges that she had not been under the influence of alcohol or enough to have somehow not remembered why she was staring at a ceiling and having had a sexual encounter with the former president before he was elected.
Well, let me turn back to our defense attorney here, Danny Savalos, and ask you about this mistrial question, right? We saw this motion for the mistrial from the defense after the first part of Daniels' testimony today. The judge saying there, the quote was, things would have been better left unsaid, right? And then he put some of the blame on the defense for not objecting more before ruling against the idea of a mistrial here. Did the defense miss an opportunity there, like the judge is saying, where they didn't protest enough?
Right, because what he's talking about is objections. And there's a point to be made there that because the defense may not have objected as frequently as they could have, they may not have preserved that issue for appeal. So that could end up being problematic. I believe the defense takes the position they objected in some other way, or maybe they did it as an ongoing objection. It wasn't clear from the Google Doc that we were keeping on real time with. But here's the thing. It doesn't really matter that the mistrial motion was denied. The real issue is on appeal. Will this come up on appeal? And you see Judge Merchan's words right there. We just had them up. He essentially concedes that it was problematic. So if I'm defense counsel and there's a conviction and it goes up on appeal, I highlight those words. There you go, right there at the top. I highlight those words and I put them before the appellate division, the first department, and I say even the judge was of the opinion that this was problematic.
So, Michelle, was that the point of bringing up a mistrial, to say we now have a response to the question on the record and they're laying the foundation, the defense
Absolutely. So this is a defense team that has tried to do as much as it possibly could to preserve the opportunity for Donald Trump to be able to stay in this election cycle and continue his election campaigning. And so the strategizing across several cases, over 90 indictments, has been trying to figure out as best as possible how to get rid of these cases. And so the question for a mistrial today, even if Stormy Daniels had not taken the stand, it is possible that there might have been a motion for a mistrial in this case. So we should just be clear about this. Their interest is in getting rid of this so that he is able to be the boldest candidate that he can be for the Republican ticket.
Danny, I want to put one more quote up on the screen for folks to look at from Trump's defense team that said, there's no way to unring the bell, in our view, adding that this is the kind of testimony that makes it impossible to come back from. The judge granted the request to strike some items from the record, some of Stormy Daniels' testimony here, but the jury already heard it, right? Can you unring the bell? Can you put the genie back in the bottle once the jury has heard something, even if the judge says you didn't hear it?
You cannot. And that's the argument that they need to make, which is that essentially this is not a sexual assault case. And in a sense, it was becoming a sexual assault case. This is a false entries in business records case. And then as a secondary issue, whether or not it was done to protect a campaign or to influence a campaign or promote a campaign, or it could be for tax violations. What it is not is a sexual assault case. So while it is important for Stormy Daniels and women like her to be able to tell their stories, this may not be the relevant probative evidence that belongs in this case. And when juries hear that kind of prejudicial material, they can't unhear it. That's why we have mistrials. And it's true that the mistrial wouldn't prevent Trump from being re-prosecuted, but it would achieve the ultimate goal of delay, which has long been their goal. And that would absolutely achieve it if a mistrial was granted, although it was never going to be granted.
Well, Michelle, I'll ask you the last question here. Obviously, what we heard today was this salacious testimony. I think most people would agree that it was sort of unexpected, or maybe it was expected. But for a jury having to listen to everything they've heard to this point and then to hear today this testimony, does it get harder to keep their attention if you don't have something equally interesting when you start to get back into records and minutia, things like that?
That's a really great question, because it centers what this case is about. This case is about the business records. It is actually a misdemeanor to just pay someone off. In fact, in some instances, it's not illegal. What makes this case rise to the level of felony is the question, was there some other crime looking to be concealed in this? And in one lane, by the testimony that was heard today, it actually gives more weight to why there would be an interest in trying to conceal shortly before the presidential election and to silence Stormy Daniels.
More to come with the trial resuming on Thursday. Michelle Goodwin and Danny Savalas, we appreciate you both being with us today. Thank you. I want to go to NBC's Yasmin Vasugian now outside the courthouse again for us today. She was inside the courtroom during all of this today. Yasmin, I just want to get your perspective. Can you break down the atmosphere in the room there? We had the former president and Stormy Daniels just a few feet away from each other for the first time since the story about their encounter came out. Talk to me about what you felt in the room.
It's difficult, Aaron, to communicate kind of the surreal nature of what I witnessed today, honestly. The former president of the United States, presumptive Republican nominee for president, running for re-election come November, sitting 8 feet away from Stormy Daniels as she testified today. Eric Trump in the courtroom as well, Alina Habba, Boris Epstein, along with former president's entire legal team. The energy in the courtroom was really kind of stunning. And you could kind of sense that from the jury as well as they listened, especially to direct initially from the people's attorneys. It was like a tennis match that they were watching. You know, their heads moving back and forth, call and response, call and response. Especially during the time in which they talked about specifically the sexual encounter back in 2006 between Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump. They seemed very engrossed, Aaron, in what it was that Stormy had to say about that moment, directly contradicting, obviously, so much of what Donald Trump has repeatedly said over the last 18 or so years, and that he never encountered Stormy Daniels. He doesn't know who she is. They never had sex that night, directly in contradiction to some of what we have heard from the former president. It was a real stunning moment, Aaron, I will say, in the courtroom, watching that, but also the jury kind of taking a page out of the book of Judge Juan Merchan, in that he didn't want her to go into extreme detail and constantly kind of stopping and chiding Stormy Daniels and saying, listen to the question and answer the question directly. You don't need to elaborate any more beyond that.
I'm curious to know if you sensed a change in the mood in the room as the cross-examination was happening there. The Trump camp accused Daniels of trying to get a payday from her story about the former president. What was it like when his lawyer immediately moved to go after her, to attack her credibility here?
Susan Necheles went after Stormy Daniels, absolutely, from the get-go. It was not a friendly exchange between the two women, in which she consistently tried to go after Stormy Daniels' credibility. And this is something that we had predicted, right? We knew two of the most problematic witnesses that the prosecution were going to call would be Stormy Daniels and then potentially Michael Cohen as well, and their problematic past, right? Kind of painting this picture of an individual, of a woman who was out to get Donald Trump, who had an axe to grind, right? And that was something that she did very much in that courtroom, in which she went after Stormy Daniels. At one point saying to Stormy Daniels, you want to see Donald Trump in jail, don't you? And Stormy Daniels said, I want him to be held accountable. This is all about money, Stormy, isn't it? And she says, no, it's not about money at all. I just want to get the story out there. I want to feel protected. I don't want to be scared anymore. At one point, it seemed as if Stormy Daniels was trying to defend herself to a certain extent, and much of the social media posts that she has posted. One other thing that I do want to talk about, Aaron, just quickly here, is the strategy in which Susan Necheles took in attacking Stormy Daniels, right? Talking about kind of the credibility of her timeline. What's problematic about that is oftentimes with the former president, he is attacked about the things that he says on social media, the things that he writes in books as well, right? So using an attack on Stormy Daniels, that could very much be used against her own client as well. That is the former president of the United States. A stunning day, really, all around, Aaron, in court today.
Stunning for sure. Yasmin Vasugian for us outside the courthouse there in Lower Manhattan. Yasmin, thank you. There, of course, is a political angle to all this as well. So we want to bring in our political pros, Hogan Gidley, a former deputy press secretary in the Trump administration, and Democratic strategist and former Obama campaign advisor, Amisha Cross, here with us as well. Hogan, I'll start with you here. This is a situation, obviously, where, as someone who knows the former president, this is a situation where you've got these details that nobody would want other people to know necessarily being aired out for the public to consume. The former president can't say anything about it in the courtroom, outside the courtroom now. What do you think is his mood? What do you think is going through his head as he's listening to this testimony?
First of all, this is fascinating because the judge himself said he was going to allow all this testimony. Now, all of a sudden, he's trying to walk it back, put the toothpaste back in the tube, trying to figure out a way to salvage what he actually created. So it's his fault, first and foremost. Second is, I believe they put Stormy on the stand to try and tarnish Donald Trump's reputation to the jury, make them hate Donald Trump. Newsflash, it's Manhattan. They already hate Donald Trump, okay? The judge already hates Donald Trump. That's all fine. The question becomes, how does this play? Should this case continue? Should there be a conviction? Should he be not guilty in this whole situation? The American people right now are concerned with things that don't have anything to do with what they're talking about in this trial. They're worried about their own gas, their own groceries, their own economy, crime in their neighborhoods, et cetera. And so it's fascinating to watch this because we have to talk about it. It's what's newsy out there for us. But for the American people, the folks out there trying to make ends meet, doesn't matter one bit.
I still have to wonder, though, for the Donald Trump that you know, is he sitting there thinking, you know what, fine, say it all, and it'll help me in the end? Or is he, you know, drilling a hole in his lip?
Well, I'm sure right now he feels it helps because polling shows 67% of the people in this country believe these are politically motivated attacks, and 56% of the people believe Joe Biden is part of it. So it obviously helps him right now. But I guarantee you this, he ain't happy. He's sitting there and not being able to defend himself. Those gag orders, as I understand it, are really designed to protect the defendant so the prosecution can't say things out of court to hurt the defendant. In this case, he's just defending himself and getting gagged for it. That's a problem.
So, Misha, let me turn to you on this because, we talk about the impact that these things have on voters and how people watching are then pushed or not pushed to act. Is there something here for the Biden campaign, especially as we heard this level of detail today, something here for the Biden campaign to latch on to start using as part of their effort to win over votes?
As of today, I don't think so. I think that I agree with a couple of your legal analysts a little while ago. Stormy Daniels was probably not the best person to put on the stand. I think that she hurt the issue more than she carried it, quite frankly, because she answered a lot of things that were not asked and because she came across aggressive. It seemed like there was a vendetta held. She just was not, either was not coached well or just could not contain herself. But I think that for the Biden camp, they are doing, to a certain extent, what we just heard Hogan talk about a moment ago. They are focusing on, we know that for the current Vice President, Kamala Harris, is out doing her economic tour. They're focused on these kitchen table issues that are the base for the voting populace across this country. Should there be something that comes out of this that looks like a conviction or actual conviction, then I think that the American public will be leaning more towards trying to jump into this a little more in terms of it being a radar point for them. But right now, it's just not on it for the overwhelming majority of Americans.
I can't help but to wonder, though, as someone who covers this White House and who covers the Biden campaign as a part of my regular job now, is there a point at which they have to look at the reality of who's getting the attention, right? We know that so much attention is focused on what's coming out of these courtrooms, and particularly out of this courtroom in New York now. I would imagine there are a lot of people who didn't know that Kamala Harris was out this week making statements about economic opportunity, that President Biden was on Capitol Hill giving a speech earlier today, and that the campaign is continuing to have these events around the country while Donald Trump is sitting in a courtroom and people's attention is focused there. What's the pivot? At what point do they try to grab back some of the attention?
I would say the pivot is not for the Biden administration. The pivot is for news organizations. We know that there's a president who's out on the campaign trail. There's a vice president that's out on the campaign trail. It is a conscious decision to continue to cover this to the extent that it is happening, irrespective to the issues that we know are ranking by polls and otherwise are the top issues for the American public. And I think that it's actually it's problematic because it showcases there was no real lesson learned from 2016. Donald Trump can't afford to run nationwide ads, but media is running those nationwide ads for him on a regular basis because they continue to chase after this, hoping to find something that people will latch on to.
Yeah, and Hogan, I'll ask you about that just to wrap up here. And part of I know that for us in the news media, part of our job is to make a record of history, right? And this is a historic moment, regardless of who the person is. It is a former president that's sitting in a courtroom, but he's not out making a ton of campaign speeches, and yet you do have these appearances on television that sort of create this quasi-campaign effort, no? And does that resonate with potential voters and people who are already in his camp?
Yeah, look, I think Amisha hits on a great point. I also hate the media and the way they cover things. So see, we're on the same page, bringing folks together. Listen, It's interesting because when he does have these moments going into the courtroom, leaving the courtroom, he uses it to talk about issues. Yes, he says a few things about the trial here and there, but for the most part, unconstitutionally, he's been gagged. He can't do that. So he's talking about issues of the economy, talking about these college campuses. So when he does have those moments, he's seizing them to talk about policy, talk about issues that matter to the American people. And you're right. When he has the chance, regardless of where he is or what he's doing, he's sucking the oxygen out of the room every single time in the media. Just fall for it.
I wish I had more time to argue the point with you, but no, I appreciate the perspective, and I appreciate you both being here to help us sort of look at the politics involved with what's happening in a courtroom this week and for the weeks to come. Thank you both, Hogan and Amisha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, a lot of other big headlines to get to tonight, of course. We're going to catch up on all of that for you with our regular programming when that picks up right after a quick break. Stay with us. We are coming on the air tonight as powerful storms sweep across the middle of the country. Millions of people in the path of baseball-sized hail, heavy rain, and possibly more tornadoes. We are live on the ground with a potentially dangerous night ahead for one of America's biggest cities. Plus, the clock stopped for now on that potential TikTok ban here in the U.S. The company now suing the government. Why it could take years for this whole thing to get sorted out. Then aid to Gaza now, quote, choked off as the Israeli military closes a crucial entry point. Where that leaves a potential ceasefire deal, we're live in Israel for you. And police are looking into a shooting just outside Drake's mansion just days after some increasingly personal beef between him and Kendrick Lamar. What we know about how it happened later in the show. Hey, everybody, I'm Aaron Gilchrist in for Hallie tonight. And right now, close to 30 million people are under severe storm threats. More possibly baseball-sized hail and more potentially dangerous tornadoes in the Midwest and Plains states, including the entire cities of Chicago and Indianapolis, now under tornado watches, with the threat continuing into late tonight. That's after a barrage of really destructive storms, nearly 200 barreling across the U.S., with at least one person now dead, another still missing in Oklahoma. And take a look at the aftermath here. Entire homes just pulled apart, power lines taken down, the nursing home there evacuated, 24 people rescued from homes collapsed around them in the second tornado to hit the town of Barnsdall in just 5 weeks. With the worst of it all possibly still yet to come. Forecasters warning of more severe threats coming as soon as tomorrow for 125 million people all the way from Texas to Maryland. We have team coverage for you. Bill Caron standing by. We want to start with Jay Gray on the ground in Oklahoma now. Jay, talk to us about what you're seeing there. We know there are two now incidents in just a matter of weeks in that area, and it's still not out of the woods.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, Aaron. Overwhelming damage in parts of Bartlesville where we are, as well as around this area. We know at least one person was killed as a result of these storms, and this is what it left behind. You can see some of the damage and devastation, the metal roofing that was pulled from a building a few blocks away, power lines that were snapped and thrown up against this hotel, and the intensity of that wind. Take a look at the side wall of this hotel. 2x4s pushed through the wall by those winds. We talked with a family who rode the storm out inside this hotel. Listen to what they said.
It was mostly the loud bangs and crashes that were the first sign, and we all just went running. The suddenness of the severity was shocking.
I'll start with them, go to that pile, and then go. Yeah, and look, here we are. Another overwhelming part of all of this is the cleanup. They are working so quick to remove some of this debris. You can see they're putting power poles back up, power down. They pulled a lot of the damage over here just behind us and piled that up, getting ready to pull it away. We talked to folks in the hotel, like I talked about. They said the sirens were going off for 30 minutes or more and then suddenly just stopped. Well, here's why. Here is the tornado siren ripped from its moorings and pulled down, pulled across the street by these crews. But that was the warning system. It worked up until it didn't, Aaron, and it was pulled away.
Wow, just amazing. Jay Gray for us in Oklahoma tonight. Jay, thank you. Let's turn to meteorologist Bill Cairns now with the latest here. So, Bill, this is just the beginning, really, right? There are more severe storms possibly coming.
Yeah, we're already starting to see some active tornado warnings. We've had one observed tornado just now in Michigan, and this will go for at least the next 4 to 6 hours. And then tomorrow, we're going to do it all over again. Tomorrow actually looks a little more scary than what we're even dealing with this evening. And by the way, where Jay Gray was located there, they did confirm, the National Weather Service in Tulsa, that that was an EF4 tornado. Pretty rare to have one that strong. Winds of at least 170 miles per hour. So that was a very significant tornado. So here's what we're dealing with now. We have areas of storms in lower Michigan and also in Indiana. These are the strongest storms. Tornado watch up for 9 o'clock. That includes Chicago to Fort Wayne to Indianapolis. And then this tornado watch, which is on the border here of Ohio, Michigan, and also Indiana, is until 11 o'clock. We'll likely get another tornado watch for northern Kentucky and southern Ohio that will last probably through the middle of the night a little later. So here's Indianapolis. I have my eyes on you. This supercell thunderstorm is rolling right along Interstate 70. Severe thunderstorm warning. It has a little hook on it. At any time, this could go to a tornado warning, and that should be over the top of Indianapolis in about maybe half hour to 45 minutes from now. Here's that active tornado warning. The sirens are going off. Tornado warning for Decatur, Michigan. This is Kalamazoo. This is going to come up here and cross Interstate 94 in about the next 20 to 30 minutes. This is an observed tornado, and you can see that hook. If there's a tornado on the ground, it would be just to the south side of Decatur. A lot of large hail to the north side of that also. So as far as the problems go, as we go through the rest of this evening, we're going to turn our focus from Indiana, push it all through Ohio, in northern Kentucky. This will include the Louisville area, Cincinnati, Lexington, Columbus, and then we'll watch these storms weakening late tonight through central portions of Ohio. If we get strong tornadoes, ones that can, take out a town or at least a portion of it, it would be in this hatched area here. And again, that does include the big cities here along the Ohio River and Columbus. And as I mentioned, Aaron, we're going to do this all over again tomorrow. A huge area, 53 million people. The enhanced risk is everywhere in the orange. I think this could go up to a moderate risk tomorrow, especially for the Nashville area here in central and portions of western Kentucky. We once again could be dealing with strong tornadoes. This time, it'll be from St. Louis to areas of Kentucky to Nashville. So, Aaron, you get the picture. We've been setting up in a very dangerous weather pattern for the last couple of weeks. It continues tonight, but this time it's in Indiana and Michigan.
All right, the warning is out. Let's hope people can stay safe out there. Bill Cameron's for us tonight. Bill, thank you. The Israeli military seizing control of a key border crossing in southern Gaza and is now calling the Hamas announcement of accepting a ceasefire deal a sabotage attempt. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying this new action in Rafah overnight isn't the widely expected all-out ground assault it's been threatening for months. You can see plumes of smoke over Rafah right here in the image on your screen. Now, the situation on the ground looks like this. IDF tanks rolling into Rafah, soldiers raising the Israeli flag over some parts of that area as well. And here you see tanks running over Gaza signs as they cross into that enclave, with Hamas now warning fighting inside Rafah will, quote, not be a picnic. The United Nations saying Israel's military operation and the closure of that crucial entry point now, I'm quoting here, choking off key aid to Gaza, as we're also hearing new reports about medics and patients fleeing Rafah's main hospital. I want to bring in Raf Sanchez now, who's following every update here from Tel Aviv. You've been gathering the latest, Raf. What do we know about the situation on the ground in Rafah right now? We're hearing these reports about the, from the IDF, about new rockets fired from Rafah. What do you know?
Yeah, Aaron, so the IDF saying in the last couple of hours that Hamas fired more rockets from the Rafah area towards Reim, which is where that festival on October 7th was taking place, and also towards the area around the Kerem Shalom crossing. Now, that second one is really important because that crossing, along with Rafah, is one of the key lifelines for humanitarian aid getting into Gaza. The Rafah crossing is closed following that Israeli attack into southern Gaza, but the Kerem Shalom crossing has also been closed since Sunday after an earlier Hamas rocket attack which killed 4 Israeli soldiers. Now, when President Biden spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday, he got a commitment, according to the White House, from the Israeli leader to reopen Kerem Shalom. The State Department today is saying they expect it to be open within the next 24 hours. But we have a situation now where the two main lifelines for humanitarian aid into Gaza are closed. The UN is warning they could be just hours away from running out of fuel to distribute aid inside of Gaza. So this is a major, major concern that relative progress that's been made in terms of getting aid in could all be undone, and could be undone pretty quickly if those crossings remain closed. Aaron.
Which, Raf, is partly the reason that the ceasefire deal is such an important element here. There was confusion yesterday, I know, about whether there was actually a deal that Hamas was accepting or what deal Hamas was accepting. And now we are hearing from the Israeli prime minister that this was sort of a tactic being deployed here by Hamas. What would it really take for the needle to realistically move here and for there to be a deal that Israel can agree to, that Hamas would agree to?
So Israeli negotiators, Hamas negotiators are back in Cairo tonight. CIA Director Bill Burns is there also, along with mediators from Qatar and Egypt. And as you said, Aaron, they are basically trying to bridge the gaps between the deal that Hamas has agreed to and the deal that Israel has agreed to, which are basically separate texts. Now, the White House said earlier that having looked at both of them, they feel that the gaps are not unbridgeable, and they are hoping that this summit in Cairo could lead to a breakthrough, could lead to a final agreement. We have obviously been here many times before where there has been optimism about a deal, only for those hopes to be dashed. I'll give you an example of one of the discrepancies between Israel and Hamas's positions. Hamas is saying it is prepared to release 33 hostages in the first stage of this ceasefire deal, but it is saying that while some of those hostages might be alive, others would be dead bodies. And the Israelis are saying that is a non-starter, that they are expecting 33 people to come out alive in that first stage of negotiations. So it is gaps like that, important gaps, that they are trying to bridge in Cairo tonight. Aaron.
Just about 1 o'clock in the morning there in Tel Aviv, where you are, Raf. We know you'll be following this through the night there, and for us tomorrow as well. Raf Sanchez, thank you. Well, let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, a panel of independent FDA advisors planning to talk about whether to recommend the first MDMA-assisted therapy for treating PTSD. Now, you might know MDMA as ecstasy or Molly. There really hasn't been a review of a new PTSD treatment in decades. The drug would be used in combination with some form of psychological intervention. Number 2, NASA and Boeing calling off last night's much-anticipated Starliner launch for safety reasons. There's a problem with one of the rocket's valves. 2 astronauts were already strapped in when that launch to the International Space Station was scrubbed. NASA says they'll try again, maybe on Friday. Number 3, charged lemonade will soon be history at Panera. The company saying today it's phasing out that controversial drink. Remember, lawsuits blamed the super caffeinated drink for at least 2 deaths. Panera says it's listening to customers about what they want to see on the menu. Number 4, Apple announcing new versions of its iPad Air and iPad Pro today. CEO Tim Cook calling it, quote, the biggest day for iPad since its introduction. The Pro will use a new kind of display that will be brighter and more vibrant. All of the new models will be powered by Apple's new chip. And number 5, Disney's CEO telling investors they're pumping the brakes on Marvel content. Bob Iger says the goal is to boost quality. They plan to release no more than 3 Marvel films and 2 Disney Plus shows every year. Deadpool and Wolverine set to be the only Marvel film released in 2024. Well, when we come back, a scary scene on a highway in Virginia. What happened when the bed of a dump truck slammed into a bridge? TikTok now suing the U.S. government, setting up a major legal showdown that could determine the future of one of the world's most popular apps. The company filing suit today after President Biden signed a law last month that would force TikTok's Chinese owner, ByteDance, to either sell the app or be banned in the U.S. TikTok writing in the lawsuit that the law is an unprecedented violation of the First Amendment. Now, remember, lawmakers don't want TikTok to be owned by a Chinese company because of national security concerns. They're worried that China could force the company to hand over Americans' data. The Justice Department says it isn't commenting on this new lawsuit. Savannah Sellers is joining me now. She's been covering this topic for some time now. And Savannah, we were expecting this lawsuit, right? We knew something like this was going to be coming, and it being filed effectively pauses the timeline for when TikTok has to be sold or be banned. We don't know how long of a pause this could be, because this could actually go all the way to the Supreme Court, right?
That's exactly right, Aaron. Hi, thanks for having me on. So, yes, we were absolutely expecting this. After President Biden had signed this into law, we heard from TikTok CEO in a video, of course, posted on TikTok, where he vowed legal action. And that is that point that we are now at. And you're right, this timeline is totally interrupted by the fact that they now have this legal challenge. So if you remember, just a couple weeks ago, end of April 24th, President Biden signed this bill into law. What that did is it says this company, parent company of TikTok, it's called ByteDance. That's what's Chinese owned partially, and the concern here, has 9 months to divest TikTok, to basically spin off that platform to an American buyer, to an approved buyer by the U.S. government. Then the president could also extend that by another 90 days. So effectively that puts it at a year until TikTok could potentially be banned in the United States if not divested from its parent company. But while this legal challenge is in play, it's essentially on pause. And you're exactly right. The operating theory here is that should this move forward, because we are anticipating that the U.S. government would file a motion to dismiss this, but should this move forward, which there's a very good chance it will, that then whoever were to lose this, whether that's TikTok, whether that's the U.S. government, they would then appeal it. The only place that you can appeal from this particular court is the Supreme Court. So it goes up to the Supreme Court. Of course, that timeline is unknown. One other thing that's interesting is this is specifically in the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. That's a very specific court, and it was actually essentially written into this law that should there be any challenges, this would have to come before this particular court. It's not a normal trial court. It's an appeals court, even though this is the first legal action taking place here. Aaron.
So I want to ask you a little bit about the lawsuit itself here, right? TikTok addresses some of the national security concerns that lawmakers cited in writing the law that the president ultimately signed, and they say it's not enough of a reason to restrict free speech. Talk to us about what this lawsuit lays out.
Yeah, so what TikTok is essentially saying is that the fact that those are unspecified concerns is not enough. And I'll actually read you in here. They're saying that you are essentially burdening the free speech of users unless and until the president issues a public report on the specific national security concerns here. Because, Aaron, as you'll remember, we have not heard anything concrete necessarily. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill certainly have heard things that they say made them quite concerned about the data of Americans. They were getting these security briefings behind closed doors. And I asked several lawmakers on Capitol Hill, did you hear anything concrete that made you feel that this is a real concern? I heard from almost every single one. I asked yes, full stop, without any other details. So we will see if this, in any type of discovery phase in a lawsuit here, could potentially mean that we get that information, Aaron.
All right, so much more to come on this, Savannah. I have a feeling you're going to get to know the D.C. Circuit Court building in the months to come.
I'll see you there.
Yeah, we'll be right across the street. Thanks for staying up with us this evening. Yeah. Of course, you can catch Savannah and her partner, Joe Fryer, every morning, weekday mornings, right here on NBC News Now, starting bright and early at 7 a.m. Eastern. Well, NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it's tough to read, watch, or listen to all of them, our bureaus have done it for you. We call this segment The Local. From our Southern Bureau, a Tennessee-based sanitation company saying it will pay nearly $650,000 for illegally hiring kids. A federal investigation found they worked at plants in Iowa and Virginia doing things like sanitizing dangerous equipment at meat processing plants. The company says it cooperated with the investigation and wants a safe work environment. From our D.C. Bureau, dashcam video catching the terrifying moment a dump truck. Look at this, the bed of the truck raised up, slammed right into a bridge. This is in Northern Virginia. You can see it flip right over there. The bridge off of I-66 was not damaged. Nobody was hurt here. Some of the lanes of that highway were closed for a few hours while crews cleaned up that mess. And from our Western Bureau, look who just wanted to take a dip in the pool. Those are real bears. Mama bear wading into a backyard swimming pool in California. 'Tis the season, right? You can see her two cubs there watching it all, waiting for their little floaty arms to be put on before they jump in. The guy who caught the moment on video here says he's used to seeing all kinds of animals in this area. He's right by a national forest near LA. There was an inflatable bear right by the pool too, just in case you missed that. Coming up, the Boy Scouts doing something it's never done in its nearly a century-long history, more than a century. What its rebranding looks like next. Boy Scouts of America trying to rebrand itself, changing its name for the first time in its 114-year history. It's now going to be known as Scouting America. That's starting next February on the organization's 115th anniversary. The group says the change reflects the continuing efforts to make the program inclusive for everyone. Now, this is a big change that comes after some big issues for the organization, as it spends hundreds of millions of dollars to compensate thousands of men who say they were sexually abused as children in this program. Maura Barrett is following this one for us and joins us now. So, Maura, over the last few years, we've really seen this push by the Boy Scouts to try to make the organization more inclusive, and it's pretty different now from how this organization started.
Yeah, absolutely, Aaron. I mean, it's more than 100 years old, and it's an organization that's known to hold firm on to tradition. And so change is naturally difficult, but they've made these changes over the last decade, especially in light of the turmoil that they faced. But back in 2013, they made the decision to start including gay scouts. Then shortly after that, 2 years later, they ended its blanket ban on gay adult leaders as well. Then in 2017, they allowed trans children who identified as boys to enroll in just boys-only programs. But then the same year, they also announced that girls would be welcome into the program. Now, this was different than the Girl Scouts organization, which also caused some confusion and controversy in that sense. But they were trying to be more inclusive when it comes to the Boy Scouts specifically. And then throughout 2018 and 2019, there was more inclusivity actions to include girls going forward, again, in that Boy Scouts umbrella. And so the president said today, this was announced at their annual conference, the president said that though our name will be new, our mission remains unchanged. We are committed to teaching young people to be prepared for life. And now the name change will officially take effect starting next year in February. But the president said that they anticipate organizations, groups to start identifying with the new name as soon as in the next couple of months, Aaron.
Yeah, at the same time, Maura, there's been all this turmoil in the last few years for this organization, right? We had the bankruptcy there, settling these claims of sexual abuse within the programs. Where does all that stand?
Well, if you think back to it, when all of this was unfolding, it also was timed out along with the pandemic. And so the pandemic really hit this organization hard to start. They lost about 1 million members during that time. They sit at about 1 million members right now. Their peak was at 5 million, just to give you some context there. Understandably, it was hard to participate in these organization groups during the pandemic, but then they were also hit with these allegations, lawsuits of sexual abuse. And in 2020, at the same time, they filed for bankruptcy protection because of these nearly 300 lawsuits and sex abuse claims. And then they reached a settlement, an $850 million settlement with thousands of men who said that they were abused as children in 2021. And then just last year, a judge upheld this $2.4 billion bankruptcy plan. And basically what that means is it gives the Boy Scout group, the organization, the ability to operate while they're paying compensation to these men who allege that they faced sexual abuse when they were children. And so all of this is still unfolding behind the scenes as the organization works to push forward and rebrand its image, Aaron.
All right, Maura Barrett for us tonight. Maura, thank you. And still to come, what we know about the shooting outside Drake's home in Toronto that left a security guard seriously hurt. Stay with us. Police in Toronto now asking for help from the public to find the suspects involved in a shooting outside Drake's Toronto mansion. A security guard there was seriously hurt. Listen.
When officers arrived, they located a male who was suffering from an apparent gunshot wound. That male was taken to hospital in serious condition.
So I want to show you some aerial images here of the rapper's home. This is in the aftermath of this incident. And this, of course, comes as Drake right now is making a lot of headlines for his feud with Kendrick Lamar. The two rappers releasing multiple new diss tracks, going after each other, of course. Now a rep for Drake saying that the singer was not hurt, but we still don't know if he was home at the time, and we also don't know the motive of the possible suspects here. I want to bring in Emily Ikeda. So, Emily, there's obviously still a lot that we don't know about what's happening right now, but walk us through what we do know. What can you tell us?
Hey there, Aaron. Well, I can tell you at this hour, there's still a heavy police presence outside of Drake's Toronto mansion, and police say that will continue to be the case in the coming days because there is this active manhunt underway as they try to pin down the suspect or suspects of this drive-by shooting. Police say it happened around 2 a.m. this morning. A security guard that had been standing near the gates to the mansion had been shot and now is in serious condition. It's not clear if Drake was home at the time of the shooting, but we know that he is not injured. Aaron?
So we also don't know the who or the why here, right? We don't necessarily know who the suspects are, what the motive might be here, but we also can't ignore the fact that there's this big feud between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. So I can't help but to wonder if that's being looked at as potentially something that could be involved here, whether this was an overzealous fan of Kendrick Lamar maybe who went to Drake's home. What do you think?
Well, I'll say this, Aaron, at this point, again, just underscoring, can't underscore enough that we don't know the motive, but even police are acknowledging that they are aware of this increasingly escalating rap battle between Kendrick Lamar and Drake. Take a look at this. Even in the last week and a half or so, they have exchanged 6 diss tracks, touching on a range of topics from Ozempic to size shaming to authenticity of music, and they've grown increasingly personal and serious. One of Kendrick Lamar's video even shows an aerial of Drake's home, the home that is now the scene of a shooting. We reached out to both of their reps for comment, but have not heard back. Aaron?
Yeah, and I was about to ask you about that, if we had heard anything from their reps, but I wonder, have we heard anything directly even about the sort of this back and forth that's been going on musically between the two, or only in the context of the songs they've been releasing?
They've really been focusing on the content of the songs. Drake has addressed some of the allegations. You know, in one of the songs, Kendrick Lamar suggested that he was a pedophile. Drake denying those allegations in one of the songs. So we've seen a bit of a back and forth and then some, and we could continue to see that in the days to come, Aaron.
Because only no press is bad press. Emily Ikeda for us tonight. Emily, we appreciate it. Thank you. And that wraps it up for this hour. Coverage picks up right now. We are coming on the air tonight with another dramatic day in court in the cases against former President Donald Trump. We're just learning in the last hour or so about one case in Florida that's been indefinitely delayed. We're going to tell you why and what we know about that. And also the latest in the hush money trial of the former president, what the adult film actress at the center of it all is saying in her testimony today. Plus, powerful storms sweeping across the middle of the country, millions of people in the path of rain, hail, and possibly more tornadoes. We are live with the potentially dangerous night ahead for one of America's biggest cities. And then the clock stopped for now on that potential TikTok ban here in the U.S. The company is suing the federal government why it could take years for this whole thing to get sorted out. And aid to Gaza now, quote, choked off as the Israeli military closes a crucial entry point where that leaves a potential ceasefire deal. We're live in Cairo, where those key negotiations are happening. Plus, you won't be seeing those controversial charged lemonades on Panera Bread's menus anymore. That's after it was blamed for at least 2 deaths. We're going to talk to an expert about why the drink may have been just too much. Hey, everybody, I'm Aaron Gilchrist in for Hallie Jackson tonight, and we are coming on the air with breaking news in just the last hour. The judge in former President Donald Trump's Florida classified documents case, wiping the calendar and any trial start dates, making it more possible than ever that the only courtroom where Mr. Trump will face a trial before Election Day will be the one in New York City, in which he's been sitting for the last couple of weeks. The court there just wrapping up today for the day after the other biggest name in the so-called hush money case, former adult film star Stormy Daniels, took the stand. Just 10 feet away from the former president, offering some new details about an alleged sexual encounter that prosecutors say really lit the match that has a former president now facing criminal charges for the first time in American history. Daniels saying it all went down in a hotel room in Tahoe back in 2006. This now infamous picture allegedly taken hours before that happened, and that after chatting briefly with the future president, she emerged from the bathroom to find him on the bed in a T-shirt and boxers. She said the room, quote, spun in slow motion, questioning how she, quote, misread the situation and feeling like she had put herself, quote, in a bad situation. She told the jury that she felt there was, in her words, an imbalance of power, that Mr. Trump was, quote, bigger and blocking the way out, but that she didn't feel threatened by any of that. After that, she says they had sex. Now, the testimony there causing an uproar for the defense, who even tried to get the judge to declare a mistrial because of what Daniels said. But the judge didn't really go for that. So there's the question. Why is Daniels at the center of this case anyway? Well, that's because she was paid $130,000 to keep quiet about that encounter. And you'll remember, nobody's saying the alleged affair or the hush money payment were on their own illegal. Prosecutors charging the former president with 34 counts of falsifying business records, alleging it was Mr. Trump's cover-up of the payments that was illegal and part of a scheme to influence the 2016 election. And a reminder for you, Mr. Trump pleaded not guilty to those counts and denies the alleged affair entirely. We have team coverage for you. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard outside the courthouse. So is our senior legal correspondent, Laura Jarrett. And legal analyst Danny Savalos is joining us as well. Vaughn, I'll start with you here in that breaking news in the Florida case. Talk to us here. What does the judge's decision mean for the former president and the possibility that he could see the start of a different trial before the election?
Right. Federal Judge Cannon now is indefinitely postponing the indictment, the trial over the classified documents. And this leads to unlikely that Donald Trump will face these charges in front of a jury before the November election here. The judge has set now multiple hearings to hear motions that were brought forward by Donald Trump's defense attorneys to quash the case, motions to dismiss the charges against him. So we're looking at the reality that it's likely going to be just this criminal trial here in New York, in which Donald Trump is currently facing these state charges, but potentially also the federal indictment over the federal election interference charges brought against him here. So there's a potential that just one or two of these actual indictments will lead to actual trials here before the November election, and likely the classified documents case will not come before a jury before the November election, Aaron.
Well, Danny Savalos, let me turn to you here. What's your reaction to this decision from Judge Cannon to totally wipe the calendar in this case?
Well, this is going to be really controversial because Judge Cannon is saying that the complexity of the issues involved require additional time. Federal court is not normally the place where cases slow down. It's normally the place where they speed up. That is an example of that might be Fulton County. That's a case that you would expect to move glacially against President Trump. It's in state court in a very congested courthouse in a congested county. Federal court, by contrast, has nowhere near the caseload. So it is curious that this kind of scheduling order has come out in federal court, where things, as I said, usually move as a rocket docket.
So, Laura, Danny used the word curious here. This judge has been criticized for what some people have described as a somewhat erratic way that she's handled this case. What do you make of that, this move today, and the impact it might have on some of those criticisms?
Well, it's certainly not going to dampen those criticisms. She's essentially made official, Aaron, what everybody knew was already going to happen, right? There was no way that this trial was going to go forward in May. But the reason that she's saying it can't happen is because the issues are so complex and there are so many motions left to resolve. Those are motions that she is tasked with resolving and has a whole cadre of very talented law clerks to help her with that effort. I think that this will not help any efforts to suggest that she's been moving expeditiously, but there's also no real recourse for Jack Smith here, the federal prosecutor who's doing this. It's a major blow to him, but it's not as if he can appeal this. He's really at the mercy of her timeline at this point, Aaron.
All right, Vaughn, let me turn back to you here and get back to the case that currently is in motion there in New York City. Stormy Daniels testifying today, really something that has been building, I think, over the last couple of weeks. We've been watching this trial. Break down those moments, really unprecedented moments inside the courtroom that we heard today.
Right, mere feet away from Donald Trump, Stormy Daniels testifying not only about the 2006 encounter that she alleges took place at a golf celebrity tournament in Lake Tahoe, in which that day she met Donald Trump, and then she says that she was invited by him to dinner that night, but instead of going to dinner, she wound up at his hotel room. And that is when she said that she found him in his T-shirt, in boxers, and at that point that the two had sex. And then Daniels said that upon her leaving there that day, that Donald Trump said, quote, to her, "Oh, it was great. Let's get together again, honey bunch," to which the prosecutor then asked Stormy Daniels, did he express any concern at that point about his wife finding out, to which Daniels responded, no. this hits at the heart of the allegations that Stormy Daniels was paid $130,000 before the 2016 election here. And you're looking at, for Donald Trump, somebody who is alleging not just that one encounter, but the fact that she says that he called her 2 to 3 times a week after that encounter in 2006, but then also that he invited her to a gala for Trump vodka in January of 2007 in Hollywood, and then invited her to Trump Tower in 2007 as well, as he dangled, she alleges, the potential that she could appear on The Apprentice and Celebrity Apprentice. And so for Donald Trump, he has issued a blanket statement of denial around the claims that she has made, saying only that she met him once when they got a photograph together. But what she, over the course of hours, laid out to these jurors here today was multiple interactions with the former president of the United States, and ones that, if she were to have gone public in October of 2016, the prosecution makes the case, could have been damaging to his presidential election mere weeks before that November election.
And Vaughn, before I let you go, I do want to ask you, the testimony today sort of ended in the middle of the cross-examination by the defense team here. Where are things going to pick up come Thursday?
Right. She was facing cross-examination from Susan Eccles, one of the attorneys for Donald Trump, who was hitting specifically on a couple different pieces of stories that she has shared over the last 18 years. And for the jury, calling into question her recollection of events and her truthfulness, and whether events that she said took place actually happened. We should note they have not gotten into the explicit details around the allegations of that night inside of Donald Trump's hotel room. But for the defense attorneys for Donald Trump, we should continue to expect that they will ask her more probing questions, and also the extent to which she was directly aware that Donald Trump was in fact a party to the agreement that she had signed, the non-disclosure agreement before the election, and that this was not simply just an agreement that was signed by his attorney, Michael Cohen, unknowingly on his behalf.
You know, Danny, we heard the judge in this case talk about some of the testimony that we heard from Stormy Daniels today, and it being going further than the judge thought was necessary at some points. If you're counseling Daniels at this point, and we've seen how things went today, what's the advice, Danny, you would give for when cross-examination restarts on Thursday, if you're her lawyer or the prosecutors in this case?
Answer the question that's asked and then stop talking. I know that sounds, I'm not being glib. It is so critically important. Where Daniels is having trouble is she's trying to put her spin it. She doesn't want the defense to ever score a point. You see this on cross-examination with a witness who just simply won't answer yes or no and has to argue each point or add something to the end of it. Sometimes the answer to a question is yes or no. Sometimes the answer helps the defense. She's trying to play too much lawyer and lawyer with the actual lawyer. And the rules of evidence don't allow that. The rules of evidence are slanted against the witness and in favor of the questioning attorney. So it's the same advice lawyers give clients for depositions or trial or anything. Listen to the question, only answer the question asked. You're not going to help yourself or anyone else by trying to go beyond that.
So, Laura, you were in the courtroom where this all went down today. Give us a taste of the atmosphere in the room from your observation with this first instance now of the former President Trump and Stormy Daniels just feet apart from each other.
I think tense and awkward would be putting it pretty mildly, Aaron. You have her seated merely perhaps 12 feet away from the former president, someone she says she hasn't seen or spoke to in nearly 2 decades. She's describing in vivid, lurid, sometimes disturbing detail an alleged sexual encounter he has denied since the beginning and still denies. And then she's also undergoing a grilling by the defense attorney after they lost their mistrial motion, which was to be expected. But the judge did sort of sympathize with the defense on some points, suggesting that she probably went too far afield. And I think that almost raised the stakes, Aaron, because the judge actually told the prosecution to go out and talk to her and tell her to just answer the question, as Danny was saying. And she tried to, and she came back after the afternoon session. But the pressure and the tense atmosphere in the room, you could just feel it. You could cut it with a knife. Susan Neckles went after her hard. I thought it was an interesting move to have the one female legal member of Trump's team do the cross-examination of Stormy. She was raising her voice. Stormy was raising her voice. She's being sort of cross-examined about things that she said about the former president in the past, saying, Susan's saying to her at one point, you hate him, don't you? She's saying she does hate him, saying she does want to see him go to jail, if that's what the punishment is in this case. It was very, very heated, very tense, as you would expect, Aaron.
And so what do you think the point is, Laura? I mean, to have things become heated during the cross-examination, to have Mr. Trump's lawyers sort of go at Stormy Daniels in this way, what do you think is the goal in creating this atmosphere with this particular witness?
As in any case, the hope is that she will slip up and say something that will hurt her credibility on the witness stand, as she's sort of being forced to contend with things that she said in the past, her past denials about the encounter ever happening, and she's trying to explain her way around that. This whole sort of project of cross-examination is to try to just make her look not credible, try to make her look like a liar, although they went on a very far detour for a long time, Aaron, as they're trying to explain that she was possibly motivated to lie because of an unrelated case, and so she wouldn't have to pay legal fees. I think the jury was really distracted by all of that, and they haven't really gotten to the crux of why she's there, which is this alleged encounter that the former president says never happened. But we spent hours today on cross-examination, and she was never really directly asked about that incident on cross yet. We'll see what happens Thursday.
Yeah, got a full day to sort of digest everything from today, and we'll all be paying attention again on Thursday. Laura, Vaughn, Danny, thank you all so much. Well, right now, close to 30 million people are under severe storm threats, more possibly baseball-sized hail and more potentially dangerous tornadoes in the Midwest and in the Plains states, including the entire cities of Chicago and Indianapolis. They're now under tornado watches, with the threat continuing into late tonight. That's after a barrage of just destructive storms, nearly 200 barreling across the U.S., at least one person now dead, another person still missing in Oklahoma. And take a look at the aftermath here. Entire homes just pulled apart, power lines ripped down, the nursing home there evacuated, 24 people rescued from homes collapsed around them in the second tornado to hit the town of Barnsdall in just 5 weeks, with the worst of it possibly still yet to come. Forecasters warning of more severe threats coming as soon as tomorrow for 125 million people from Texas all the way to Maryland. We have team coverage for you now. Jay Gray is on the ground for us in Oklahoma. We'll start with meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, because that map behind you is really active right now, and we're looking for the threats tonight and then also tomorrow, right?
Aaron, I can almost guarantee that damage just like you saw is happening right now. We just haven't gotten the pictures in yet because it's literally happened in the last 15 to 20 minutes. Let me take you through it. This is southern Michigan. This is Kalamazoo. You're kind of familiar with that. You can see the edge of Lake Michigan over there. Interstate 94 runs through here and Interstate 69. We have numerous supercell thunderstorms that are all capable of producing a tornado at any point. We've had at least 2 tornadoes that have come down in the last half hour or so, and we have what we call particularly dangerous situations ongoing. So Kalamazoo, the worst is over for you. You were in the huge hail. To the south of you in Portage, you likely were hit by a tornado in the last about 20 minutes. That tornado, if it's still existing here, is just south of East Comstock. Everyone is in their shelters here. The storm to the south of this one has a real classic hook on it. Everyone in Union City needs to be underground or possibly interior room. You know, you're talking about mattresses on top of you, pillows, whatever it takes to get yourself as far away from the windows and the edges of your house, because this is a tornado that is heading right over the top of Union City, Michigan. This one has a history of producing a tornado and damage. It just went north of Sherwood and north of Leonids over the last half hour. Another tornado is trying to form here to the south of this. You get the idea. The atmosphere is showing us and telling us it is very ripe for tornadoes today, and that will continue for at least the next 3 or 4 hours. Indianapolis, you were in the clear. Your storm kind of fell apart over the top of you, so that's good for you. So our watches, this is areas that it's possible for tornadoes in the next about 12 hours or so. Chicago, you're just about clear and all done. This is the storms in southern Michigan we talked about. We have a new tornado watch that's up till 1 a.m. So well after the sun sets and people go to bed, it's going to be a very dangerous night for our friends in Cincinnati to Columbus down to the Louisville area. It looks like by the time we get to Cleveland, these storms should be weakening. Right now, Indianapolis towards Fort Wayne is kind of the target zone. So, Aaron, this was the area the Storm Prediction Center told us we had the best chance for strong storms, and we're getting them now, even to the the north of this in southern Michigan is where the worst risk is. Later, we think it's going to shift further to the south. And as you mentioned, this is a multi-day event once again. We had 17 tornadoes yesterday. We've already got a couple on the ground as we speak. And then tomorrow, 53 million people are at risk from Arkansas and really from Dallas all the way through areas of Kentucky. So I'll keep you posted, Aaron. If I get any confirmation about how serious these storms are, we know there are tornadoes on the ground doing damage as I speak.
All right, Bill Cairns, we appreciate that, Bill. Thank you. Let's go to Jay Gray now in the disaster zone in Oklahoma. Jay, I mean, just the images behind you are just awful. Walk us through what you're seeing there.
Yeah, overwhelming destruction here in northeastern Oklahoma. The cleanup moving quickly as well. That's overwhelming in a different sense. They're getting a lot done here, clearing away debris, re-upping power poles here and stringing lines. But the force of this tornado was major. We just heard from the Oklahoma governor, Kevin Stitt, who says he's been told it was an F4 tornado that rushed through here, which means the winds were at 166 miles an hour or higher. We know that in the Barnesdall area, 60 to 70 homes destroyed. And across this little pocket of Oklahoma, 350 more homes destroyed. You can see the force of the wind here and what it's done to this Mini Cooper that was just torn apart. This is outside of a hotel where the hurricane struck, the tornado struck. We talked with a family that rode it out inside. Listen to what they had to say.
It was mostly the loud bangs and crashes that were the first sign, and we all just went running. The suddenness of the severity was shocking.
Yeah, and as we've talked about, the cleanup moving very quickly here. Unfortunately, in some areas, they're not going to be able to reconstruct what was there before. Those homes that are gone, businesses that are gone, and a lot of people still in this area, frankly, in shock and wondering what comes next.
Well, I mean, it's just mind-blowing to think about what we're dealing with here, Jay. This is an area that's now been hit by 2 tornadoes in, what, a month or so time, and now these folks, again, are having to get ready for more potentially dangerous weather to come their way, right?
No, you're absolutely right. They're doing all of this work with an eye in the sky and an eye on the radar and wondering what's going to come next. They understand tornadoes in this part of the country, obviously. They see them a lot. But to be hit back-to-back like that is just a very, very difficult blow. And you talk to the families who are dealing with this, and they understand that that's part of the deal here. But they also say, why back-to-back like this? And then you see some of the volunteers moving in from communities around this area, and they understand it could have been us, and that's why they're here to help while they can.
Well, that is always the glimmer of hope in these situations, that good people will step up and try to help out as best they can. Jay Gray, thank you for that reporting. Try to stay safe for us. All right, TikTok now suing the U.S. government, setting up a major legal showdown that could determine the future of one of the world's most popular apps. The company filing suit today after President Biden signed a law last month that would force TikTok's Chinese owner, ByteDance, to either sell the app or be banned in the U.S. TikTok writing in the lawsuit that the law is an unprecedented violation of the First Amendment. Now, remember, lawmakers don't want TikTok to be owned by a Chinese company because of national security concerns. They're worried that China could force the company to hand over Americans' data. Justice Department says it is not commenting on this new lawsuit. Savannah Sellers joins me now. Savannah, we were expecting this lawsuit, right? We knew something like this was going to be coming, and it being filed effectively pauses the timeline for when TikTok has to be sold or be banned. We don't know how long of a pause this could be, because this could actually go all the way to the Supreme Court, right?
That's exactly right, Aaron. Hi, thanks for having me on. So, yes, we were absolutely expecting this. After President Biden had signed this into law, we heard from TikTok CEO in a video, of course, posted on TikTok, where he vowed legal action. And that is that point that we are now at. And you're right, this timeline is totally interrupted by the fact that they now have this legal challenge. So if you remember, just a couple weeks ago, end of April 24th, President Biden signed this bill into law. What that did is it says this company, parent company of TikTok, it's called ByteDance. That's what's Chinese Chinese-owned partially, and the concern here, has 9 months to divest TikTok, to basically spin off that platform to an American buyer, to an approved buyer by the U.S. government. Then the president could also extend that by another 90 days, so effectively that puts it at a year until TikTok could potentially be banned in the United States, if not divested from its parent company. But while this legal challenge is in play, it's essentially on pause. And you're exactly right. The operating theory here is that should this move forward, because we are anticipating that the U.S. government would file a motion to dismiss this, but should this move forward, which there's a very good chance it will, that then whoever were to lose this, whether that's TikTok, whether that's the U.S. government, they would then appeal it. The only place that you can appeal from this particular court is the Supreme Court. So it goes up to the Supreme Court. Of course, that timeline is unknown. One other thing that's interesting is this is specifically in the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. That's a very specific court, and it was actually essentially written into this law that should there be any challenges, this would have to come before this particular court. It's not a normal trial court. It's an appeals court, even though this is the first legal action taking place here. Aaron.
So I want to ask you a little bit about the lawsuit itself here, right? TikTok addresses some of the national security concerns that lawmakers cited in writing the law that the president ultimately signed, and they say it's not enough of a reason to restrict free speech. Talk to us about what this lawsuit lays out.
Yeah, so what TikTok is essentially saying is that the fact that those are unspecified concerns is not enough. And I'll actually read you in here. They're saying that you are essentially burdening the free speech of users unless and until the president issues a public report on the specific national security concerns here. Because, Aaron, as you'll remember, we have not heard anything concrete necessarily. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill certainly have heard things that they say made them quite concerned about the data of Americans. They were getting these security briefings behind closed doors. And I asked several lawmakers on Capitol Hill, did you hear anything concrete that made you feel that this is a real concern? I heard from almost every single one. I asked yes, full stop, without any other details. So we will see if this, in any type of discovery phase in a lawsuit here, could potentially mean that we get that information, Aaron.
All right, so much more to come on this, Savannah. I have a feeling you're going to get to know the D.C. Circuit Court building in the months to come.
I'll see you there.
Yeah, we'll be right across the street. Thanks for staying up with us this evening. Yeah. Of course, you can catch Savannah and her partner, Joe Fryer, every morning, weekday mornings, right here on NBC News Now, starting bright and early at 7 a.m. Eastern. The Israeli military seizing control of a key border crossing in southern Gaza and is now calling the Hamas announcement of accepting a ceasefire deal a sabotage attempt. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying this new action in Rafah we saw overnight is not the widely expected all-out ground assault it's been threatening for months. You can see plumes of smoke over Rafah right here. And the situation on the ground looks like this. IDF tanks rolling into Rafah, soldiers raising the Israeli flag there as well. And here, tanks running over Gaza signs as they cross into the enclave, with Hamas now warning fighting inside Rafah will, quote, not be a picnic. And the United Nations saying Israel's military operation and the closure of that crucial entry point is now, and I'm quoting here, choking off key aid to Gaza, as we're also hearing new reports that medics and patients are now fleeing Rafah's main hospital. I want to bring in Hallie Garani now, who just arrived in Cairo, Egypt, as I understand it. Hallie, we'll talk more about the situation in Rafah in a second here. First, though, where you are in Cairo, this is really significant because this is where these intense talks have been going on and are going on. I know it's the middle of the night there, but help us understand what the state of play is now, what it's going to take to get to an agreement on a deal.
So, Aaron, there's been no breakthrough today. We understand that talks will resume tomorrow. And that in itself is significant because we know the Israeli government had not sent representatives in the previous round. That's the round where a proposal was put forth by Egyptian and Qatari mediators to Hamas. That is the proposal that was endorsed and agreed to by Hamas that Israel then said had been softened and modified without its knowledge, though it would be difficult to imagine a scenario in which the U.S. Representative in these talks, Bill Burns, who's the CIA director, would not have signed off on every aspect of the document that was presented to Hamas. You said in the intro there that the Israelis are saying this is a sabotage attempt by Hamas. Well, on the Palestinian side, they are saying that the Israeli government is trying to sabotage any attempt to come to a ceasefire agreement because they are intent on going militarily into Rafah. Now, where did the disagreements stand. One particularly salient one is that in this three-phase agreement that Hamas agreed to, there is a promise to release 33 of the remaining hostages inside of the Gaza Strip, but there is not a promise that those 33 vulnerable hostages, so the elderly, the ill, would all be alive. And Israel in particular is very intent on making sure that any first batch of hostage releases contains only live hostages. And there's also the demand from Hamas that Israel withdraw, end the siege, and in subsequent phases allow for the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip and free movement of people and free return of Palestinians and displaced Gazans to their homes, Aaron.
Hallie, we're also hearing about reports of an escalation of the tension, the activity, the fighting in Rafah. What more do we know about Israel's military plans in that area right now and how Hamas might respond to it and what it all means for the civilians, more than 1 million people that are still there?
Well, what it means for the civilians, as we've been reporting over the last 7 months now, is more displacement and more death. We know in the last 24 hours, more than a dozen civilians have been killed, according to the health ministry there in Gaza. Now, the Israeli military has taken hold of the Rafah crossing. For our viewers, this is the crossing between Egypt, where I am, and Gaza. And there's a corridor there that had been essentially controlled by the Palestinians since 2005 that the Israeli tanks were now seen operating in, bulldozing and flattening things like the Gaza sign and removing Palestinian flags. And that is something that has caused quite a bit of consternation in the Arab world. The Israelis are telling NBC this is not the full-blown offensive that the U.S. has warned again, but that is certainly something that is still on the cards, Aaron.
All right, Hallie Garani for us, just making her way into Cairo, Egypt. Hallie, thank you. Well, President Biden today denouncing a wave of anti-Semitic incidents that have taken place since the Israel-Hamas war started and pledging his commitment to the safety of the Jewish people. The president drawing parallels between the atrocities of the Holocaust and the October 7th attacks by Hamas on Israel. This was in a speech at the Holocaust Memorial Museum's Days of Remembrance ceremony. Listen.
This ancient hatred of Jews didn't begin with the Holocaust. It didn't end with the Holocaust either. This hatred continues to lie deep in the hearts of too many people in the world. And it requires our continued vigilance and outspokenness.
Now, the president's speech comes after weeks of pro-Palestinian demonstrations on college campuses across this country that really have inflamed tensions in those places. Monica Alba joining us now to talk more about this from her post near the White House. So, Monica, the White House called this a major speech on anti-Semitism in the days leading up to this, and it's coming at a time, obviously, of some real tension in this country over the Israel-Hamas war. What else stood out to you in the president's comments today?
Absolutely, Aaron. This is really the collision of these multiple storylines, all connected to the October 7th terrorist attacks, the war that has now gone on for 7.5 months since then, those campus protests, and then the ongoing, very fragile hostage negotiations that are happening today. So the president was mindful of all of those elements when he was speaking and really repeating a message he's talked about for a long time, talking about how concerned he is and his administration has been about the rise in anti-Semitism. But here is how he did link that to what we saw in terms of recent events over the last couple of weeks at many universities nationwide.
There is no place on any campus in America, any place in America, for anti-Semitism or hate speech or threats of violence of any kind. Violent attacks, destroying property, is not peaceful protest. It's against the law.
The president had been under some building pressure last week to address the campus protests. He really hadn't done so in a formal setting until he did at the end of last week. And then the White House said he would have a little bit more to say today in this larger address that was more focused on anti-Semitism. And that is something that the president has really had to walk a little bit of a fine line on when it comes to talking about the right to freedom of expression and peaceful protest, but being very clear about how he completely condemns anything that's violent or anti-Semitic. Aaron.
You know, the president also, Monica, reiterated his commitment to the security of Israel, right, and to its right to exist as an independent Jewish state. He added, even when we disagree to his comments, still, it seems the president feels a need to say that the United States stands by Israel.
That's right. He has used the word ironclad repeatedly when he is discussing the U.S. support for Israel. At the same time, there have been events in the last couple of weeks and months where there have been moments where the U.S. has been very outspoken about what Israel has done that it disagrees with. For instance, when the Israeli military killed those aid workers who were with World Central Kitchen in Gaza, or when there has been, it seems, some issues with getting more humanitarian aid into Gaza or protecting those kinds of workers, the U.S. has said we have a right to alter policy, the president has said, if they don't see enough changes from Israel on that. So those things are all looming in the background, but the U.S. and Israel relationship is one that is still very strong and one the president wants to make very clear on a day like today during a Holocaust memorial ceremony will remain that way. Aaron.
All right, Monica Alba for us outside the White House today. Monica, thank you. Well, still ahead, a runner's marathon victory taken away from him. We're going to tell you why. Plus, a neighborhood shaken in the middle of the night, a home wiped out by an explosion. What we know about the cause here. That's next. When Boeing and NASA may take another crack at that space launch, that's in the 5 things. First, though, Panera Bread saying it's phasing out its controversial charged lemonade. That's after lawsuits blamed the highly caffeinated drink for at least 2 deaths. A spokesperson for the restaurant chain today saying the nationwide discontinuation of the charged lemonade comes after a recent menu transformation. Panera says a large charged lemonade with ice has about 302 milligrams of caffeine. That's roughly 3 to 4 cups of coffee, according to the FDA. NBC News medical fellow Dr. Akshay Syal joining us now. Akshay, good to see you. Obviously, there's a such thing as having too much caffeine, right? As an avid coffee drinker, I understand that. But at what level does it become dangerous, and what does it do to your body?
Hey, Aaron, good to see you. Yeah, so the FDA has a limit, really, a guideline of what most adults in this country should follow, Aaron, and it's about 400 milligrams of caffeine. Now, this isn't a magic number, right, Aaron? So if you're at 399 versus 401, there's not going to be that much of a difference. And I think really the key here, Aaron, is people just need to listen to their body. So some side effects of having too much caffeine, you can start to get, really fidgety, really anxious. You can start to have a headache. You feel maybe some palpitations. You can see there on your screen some muscle tremors, really in severe cases. So, Aaron, I think the key takeaway here is really just to listen to your body. You don't need to necessarily, just hit 400 and stop, and you don't necessarily need to, just get super worried if you're a little bit over that. But just really listen to your body and watch for those signs that we listed.
There are a ton of caffeinated drinks on the market right now. Dunkin' is still serving that sparked energy drink. We've got all these different things that people can pop into a convenience store and buy a huge can of whatever. What do consumers have to watch out for when you're talking about any of these caffeine drinks?
Right. So, the total that people are consuming, when we talk about the 400, it's important to keep in mind that things can add up, right? So if people have a large cup of coffee during the day, that's about 200 milligrams, and then one in the evening, you're already at that 400. When you start to talk about things like pre-workout supplements or energy drinks throughout the day, it's easy to see how you can go over that number. And I think really the take-home message is those who have heart conditions should be really, really careful, Aaron, and pregnant patients, people who are expecting or people who are currently pregnant, should really be watchful and talk to their doctor about limiting their caffeine to 200 or even less than that, Aaron.
And I guess we all don't, we don't all read the labels enough. A lot of people just sort of buy the thing and go for it, but there's value in reading some of these labels to understand what's in the stuff that we're consuming.
There is, and most products will have a caffeine, number listed in milligrams. And if you see the word energy on anything, things that are, if you go to a gas station, you're buying this for energy or that for energy, there's a good chance there's caffeine or other substances like taurine in it. So you definitely want to read the label, particularly if you have the heart condition or if you're pregnant. And Aaron, just I don't think a lot of people know this, but the FDA doesn't really have a safe limit on what's good for children in terms of caffeine. So under the age of 18, really best to avoid this if you can.
That's a good point. Dr. Akshay Syal, we appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Anytime.
Well, let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, officials recovering the body of the 6th and final victim from the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse in Baltimore back in March. Investigators identified him as 37-year-old Jose Lopez from Baltimore. The investigation into that incident is still ongoing. Number 2, Minnesota officials say that 2 people are dead after a major house explosion early this morning. You can see all the damage and the debris here. Authorities are working to figure out what exactly caused that blast. Number 3, NASA and Boeing calling off last night's much-anticipated Starliner launch for safety reasons. There's a problem with one of the rocket valves, apparently. 2 astronauts were actually already strapped in when that launch to the International Space Station was scrubbed last night. NASA says they will try again, maybe on Friday. Number 4, Disney's CEO telling investors they're pumping the brakes on Marvel content. Bob Iger saying the goal here is to boost the quality. They plan to release no more than 3 Marvel films and 2 Disney Plus shows every year. Deadpool and Wolverine set to be the only Marvel film released this year. And number 5, the winner of a Southern California men's marathon just got disqualified because of water. So here's what happened here. You see it here. The man's father apparently passed him a drink, but this was not a part of an official hydration station. He was actually on a bicycle. You see it right there. All of that is against the rules. The runner says that some stations weren't ready when he got there, and he didn't know he did anything wrong. Well, coming up, an apparent attempt to assassinate Ukraine's president allegedly stopped in its tracks. What we're learning about that on the same day Vladimir Putin is sworn in for a 5th term in Russia. Plus, a deadly accident brings Malaysia's capital city to a halt. The major damage left behind after a huge tree came down. That's next. Officials in Ukraine tonight saying they foiled a Russian plot to assassinate President Volodymyr Zelensky and other top Ukrainian military and political figures. You see one of the suspects here in new video just released by the security service of Ukraine. The 2 Ukrainian colonels accused of participating in that plot have been arrested on suspicion of treason, which carries a life sentence. Now, the head of the Ukrainian State Security Service says the plot was for an attack leading up to Russian President Vladimir Putin's inauguration for a 5th term on Tuesday. Zelensky said in 2022 there have been at least 10 attempts to assassinate him over the course of the war with Russia. Megan Fitzgerald joins me now to talk a little bit more about this. So, Megan, what do we know about the details of the plot here and the 2 colonels who've been arrested?
Well, Aaron, as you mentioned, those 2 colonels who were arrested were in the very agency that's supposed to protect top officials. We also know that they were recruited before the war broke out and that this was a plan that Ukraine says was devised by Russia's Federal Security Service. Ukraine says that the original plan was for the assassination to be carried out just before Putin's inauguration, which, of course, was today. But look, as you mentioned, this isn't the first attempt at the assassination of President Zelensky. Ukrainian officials say since the war broke out in February of 2022, there have been at least 10 assassination attempts. One of the latest ones was just last month with a Polish man who was arrested by authorities for this alleged plot, said to be backed by Russia. As for this latest attempt, Aaron, so far, Russia has not responded to these accusations.
And Megan, we knew that Vladimir Putin had been reelected to this 5th term. Can you offer some context on this? What does this mean for global affairs, for the war in Ukraine?
Well, yeah, it likely means that we're not going to see an end to this war anytime soon. We continue to see Russia making these advancements on the front lines in Ukraine as this war rages on into the 3rd year. And in fact, in Putin's inauguration speech today, he talked a lot about the war. We heard him talk about a united Russia, this idea of doing everything in its power to secure its sovereign and prosperous future. Putin also spoke directly to the West, essentially saying that the efforts to undermine him have failed and that Putin is stronger than ever. Aaron?
All right. Megan Fitzgerald for us in our London bureau tonight. Megan, thank you. Well, NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day, and because it's tough to read, watch, or listen to all of them, our teams around the world have done that for you. We call this segment The Global. From Australia, a woman pleading not guilty today to killing her ex-husband's family members with poisonous mushrooms. We told you about this story about a month ago. The woman's ex-husband's parents and aunt died days after eating a meal at her home. She is set to go to court later this month. Out of Malaysia, today a tree fell across one of the busiest roads in the capital city there, killing one person and hurting two others. You can see it blocking the road here. Officials say it also damaged more than a dozen cars, and some of the branches fell on a monorail track, delaying some trains. And out of Sweden, the first day of competition wrapping up at Eurovision. That's the big song contest where countries from all over the globe pull out all the stops and all the sparkles, lots of crop tops and sequins, all the things. 10 countries made it through here, and some others are going to compete Thursday for a chance at Saturday's final. This year's security super tight here. Israel is one of the countries competing, and Eurovision's expecting tens of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters there. Well, still ahead, the Boy Scouts, as you've known them, will soon be history. Why the more than century-old organization is rebranding. Stay with us. The Boy Scouts of America trying to rebrand itself, changing its name for the first time in its 114-year history. It's now going to be known as Scouting America. That's starting next February on the organization's 115th anniversary. The group says the change reflects the continuing efforts to make the program inclusive for everyone. Now, this is a big change that comes after some big issues for the organization, as it spends hundreds of millions of dollars to compensate thousands of men who say they were sexually abused as children in this program. Maura Barrett is following this one for us and joins us now. So, Maura, over the last few years, we've really seen this push by the Boy Scouts to try to make the organization more inclusive, and it's pretty different now from how this organization started.
Yeah, absolutely, Aaron. I mean, it's more than 100 years old, and it's an organization that's known to hold firm on to tradition. And so change is naturally difficult, but they've made these changes over the last decade, especially in light of the turmoil that they faced. But back in 2013, they made the decision to start including gay scouts. Then shortly after that, 2 years later, they ended its blanket ban on gay adult leaders as well. Then in 2017, they allowed trans children who identified as boys to enroll in just boys-only programs. But then the same year, they also announced that girls would be welcome into the program. Now, this was different than the Girl Scouts organization, which also caused some confusion and controversy in that sense. But they were trying to be more inclusive when it comes to the Boy Scouts specifically. And then throughout 2018 and 2019, there was more inclusivity actions to include girls going forward again in that Boy Scouts umbrella. And so the president said today, this was announced at their annual conference, the president said that though our name will be new, our mission remains unchanged. We are committed to teaching young people to be prepared for life. And now the name change will officially take effect starting next year in February. But the president said that they anticipate organizations, groups to start identifying with the new name as soon as in the next couple of months, Aaron.
Yeah, at the same time, Maura, there's been all this turmoil in the last few years for this organization, right? We had the bankruptcy there, settling these claims of sexual abuse within the programs. Where does all that stand?
Well, if you think back to it, when all of this was unfolding, it also was timed out along with the pandemic. And so the pandemic really hit this organization hard to start. They lost about 1 million members during that time. They sit at about 1 million members right now. Their peak was at 5 million, just to give you some context there. Understandably, it was hard to participate in these organization groups during the pandemic, but then they were also hit with these allegations, lawsuits of sexual abuse. And in 2020, at the same time, they filed for bankruptcy protection because of these nearly 300 lawsuits and sex abuse claims. And then they reached a settlement, an $850 million settlement with thousands of men who said that they were abused as children in 2021. And then just last year, a judge upheld this $2.4 billion bankruptcy plan. And basically what that means is it gives the Boy Scout group, the organization, the ability to operate while they're paying compensation to these men who allege that they faced sexual abuse when they were children. And so all of this is still unfolding behind the scenes as the organization works to push forward and rebrand its image, Aaron.
All right, Maura Barrett for us tonight. Maura, thank you. And still to come, what we know about the shooting outside Drake's home in Toronto that left a security guard seriously hurt. Stay with us. Police in Toronto now asking for help from the public to find the suspects involved in a shooting outside Drake's Toronto mansion. A security guard there was seriously hurt. Listen.
When officers arrived, they located a male who was suffering from an apparent gunshot wound. That male was taken to hospital in serious condition.
So I want to show you some aerial images here of the rapper's home. This is in the aftermath of this incident. And this, of course, comes as Drake right now is making a lot of headlines for his feud with Kendrick Lamar. The two rappers releasing multiple new diss tracks, going after each other, of course. Now a rep for Drake saying that the singer was not hurt, but we still don't know if he was home at the time. And we also don't know the motive of the possible suspects here. I want to bring in Emily Ikeda. So, Emily, there's obviously still a lot that we don't know about what's happening right now, but walk us through what we do know. What can you tell us?
Hey there, Aaron. Well, I can tell you at this hour, there's still a heavy police presence outside of Drake's Toronto mansion, and police say that will continue to be the case in the coming days because there is this active manhunt underway as they try to pin down the suspect or suspects of this drive-by shooting. Police say it happened around 2 a.m. this morning. A security guard that had been standing near the gates to the mansion had been shot and now is in serious condition. It's not clear if Drake was home at the time of the shooting, but we know that he is not injured. Aaron?
So we also don't know the who or the why here, right? We don't necessarily know who the suspects are, what the motive might be here, but we also can't ignore the fact that there's this big feud between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. So I can't help but to wonder if that's being looked at as potentially something that could be involved here, whether this was an overzealous fan of Kendrick Lamar maybe who went to Drake's home. What do you think?
Well, I'll say this, Aaron, at this point, again, just underscoring, can't underscore enough that we don't know the motive, but even police are acknowledging that they are aware of this increasingly escalating rap battle between Kendrick Lamar and Drake. Take a look at this. Even in the last week and a half or so, they have exchanged 6 diss tracks, touching on a range of topics from Ozempic to size shaming to authenticity of music, and they've grown increasingly personal and serious. One of Kendrick Lamar's video even shows an aerial of Drake's home, the home that is now the scene of a shooting. We reached out to both of their reps for comment, but have not heard back. Aaron?
Yeah, and I was about to ask you about that, if we had heard anything from their reps, but I wonder, have we heard anything directly even about the sort of this back and forth that's been going on musically between the two, or only in the context of the songs they've been releasing?
They've really been focusing on the content of the songs. Drake has addressed some of the allegations. You know, in one of the songs, Kendrick Lamar suggested that he was a pedophile. Drake denying those allegations in one of the songs. So we've seen a bit of a back and forth and then some, and we could continue to see that in the days to come, Aaron.
Because only no press is bad press. Emily Ikeda for us tonight. Emily, we appreciate it. Thank you. And that wraps it up for this hour. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.